Hilchos Terumos Perek Chamisha Asar. The laws of the Truma separation, chapter 15. Today is the final chapter. We're concluding the set of halachot, and we are still discussing taruvos, mixtures of Truma. The basic law that we keep on seeing is that with Truma, the magic number is 100. If one apple of Truma falls into 100 other apples that are not Truma, the Truma is nullified. If you lose track of 1 pound of flour in 100 pounds of flour, the pound of flour that's Truma is nullified. Today the Rambam begins with a unique law. And that is that there's one case where Truma is never cancelled. Halacha Aleph says the Rambam chavis stuma. If you have a barrel that's sealed, a barrel of wine of Truma that's sealed, closed, midamas bekol shehu. It makes the entire mixture forbidden even at the smallest amount. Ketzad, what does that mean? Chavis stuma shel Truma. If you have a sealed barrel of Truma wine, shenisarva bekama alofim chaviyos stumos. It gets mixed into multiple thousands of sealed barrels. Nidma hakoil. Everything is considered to be meduma. Everything is considered to be forbidden. Why? This goes back to a principle that the Rambam told us in the laws of forbidden foods, that davar shebeminyan lo batel. Davar shebeminyan means something which is usually counted by number never becomes nullified. Sealed barrels of wine, that's how they were sold. Each one was considered an important entity. It was sold by number of barrels, and therefore even the smallest amount never loses its status. But apples weren't typically sold by number. Individual entities weren't considered to be important like that. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, we use this halacha to explain the Jewish people. We're 0.25%. Just 17 million people out of billions of people. And we make so much noise. How? Because we're davar shebeminyan. Hashem counted us. He counted us a few times in the desert. And by counting us, He gave us an entity of importance that never gets canceled even in the biggest mixture. Now, that's only if the barrels remain sealed. Niftechu echaviyah is taleh be'echad u'meya. Once the barrels are opened, okay, now they're nullified 1 in 100, the regular rules. Because once they're open, they're not so important. Halacha beis chavis stuma shenisarva b'meya chaviyos. What if you have a sealed barrel that got mixed into 100 barrels? V'nafla achas mehem layam agadol. And one of them, where's my arrow here? One of them fell into the sea. Okay, catch that. See the slide here? There's the barrel here. Boom, it changes, it falls away into the sea. Now, even though when it comes to sealed barrels, we're going to be much stricter, and 100 is not going to work, but here, because one of them fell away, says the Rambam hutru kulan. All the rest of the mixtures are allowed, are permitted. V'oimrin shel truma hishanaflan. We're lenient and we say, you know what? Probably the barrel that fell out of the mixture is the barrel that fell into the mixture, the truma barrel. We don't say this when it comes to figs. When one fig falls into 100 figs. And then one of the figs falls away. Over there we don't just say everything is permitted. You must take one fig away and give it to the Kohen as a doubtful truma. Not so by the barrels. Why? Because when a barrel falls away, it's noticeable. But when a fig falls away, it's tiny. It's not noticeable. So therefore, you must give another fig to the Kohen to demonstrate that you're still considering part of the mixture to be truma. Halacha gimel chavis stuma shenisarva b'meya chaviyos v'niftecha achas mehem. A sealed barrel gets mixed into 100 barrels, and you open one of them. Okay, here it's apples, not wine, but you open one of them. So we said before that if they all got opened up, they're all considered unimportant, and they all become nullified in each other. But what if you only open one of them? So what you do is like this. Take away 1/100th, really 101th, 101st, and then you can drink the rest of the barrel. Why? Because proportionally, if there's one barrel in 100 barrels, that means 1.01% of everything is truma. So every individual barrel you treat 1.01% as truma, and the rest you can drink. But all the other barrels remain forbidden because they're still sealed, and a sealed barrel is never nullified. B'chol achas va'achas shetipasach mehen. And then every one, as you open it, neital mimena kedei dimua v'sheisa hashar. You take out the proportional amount of truma that's mixed in, which is 1.01%, and you drink the rest.
You give this to the Kohen?
Yes, out of doubt, because you know there's definitely some truma in here, so it belongs to the Kohen. Nisar v'chaviz b'meya v'chamishim chaviyos. The Rambam picks an example. One barrel gets mixed into 150 barrels. V'niftechu mehem meya, and 100 got opened. So all the 100 that got opened are considered less important, and they can all nullify the truma among them. Neital mehem kedei dimua. You take the proportional amount of truma, which is chavis achas, one full barrel, v'sheisa hameya, and drink the other 100, because 1 to 100 is the ratio of nullified truma. Ushara chamishim asuros, but the other 50 remain forbidden. Ve'ein machazikin la'isa chavis shel truma shehi b'roif. We don't, in other words, stringently, we don't consider that the truma barrel is in the majority of barrels that got opened. Basically, with truma, we go lechumra, stringently on both sides. All the 100 barrels that opened, we assume that one of them is truma. You got to take one away, give it to the Kohen. On the other hand, we say, you know what? Maybe none of them are truma. Maybe the truma is still in the sealed barrels, and all the sealed barrels are forbidden. Afilu hayukama alafim chaviyos. Even if it was multiple thousands of barrels, kulan meduma, all the closed ones remain forbidden as a mixture of truma. The kol mashayi pasach, although every barrel as it opens, neitel himenu echad mimeya, you keep on taking 1.01%, 100th. The hashiarim shaisa, and whatever's remaining you can drink. The hashar meduma, and the rest of the closed barrels remains meduma. Bottom line of this is, the takeaway is that a closed barrel always remains truma until it's opened, out of doubt. Once you have an open barrel, you follow the regular rules of 1 to 100. Halacha dalet, another unique rule when it comes to truma. Kvar be'arnu b'hilchos yisurei ma'achalis. We've already explained in the laws of forbidden foods, shahamechametz v'hametabel oyser b'kol shehu, that leavening agents like yeast and spices forbid a mixture even in the tiniest amount. We don't care about 1 to 60, 1 to 100. If something is the source, what's making this dough, for example, or what's making this soup, well spiced, then the whole soup is forbidden. Lefichach, therefore, im risek tapuach shel truma, if a person crushed an apple that was truma, and he put it into a dough, and that caused the dough to rise, kol ha'isa midumas va'asur lazarim. The entire dough is a mixture of truma, and it's all forbidden to the priests, to non-priests. Halacha hey, beitza shenitbala betavlin shel truma. You have a hard-boiled egg. An egg is spiced with truma spices. Afilu chelmain shala asur. Even the inside yolk. It wasn't on the outside. You have a hard-boiled egg. The outside is the white part. But we say that the spices penetrate, and even the yolk is forbidden because it absorbs. Halacha vav sa'ir shel truma shenafa l'seicha isa. Yeast or sourdough of truma that falls into a dough, so it's about to make the whole dough leavened. V'higbihai, but you took it out. V'achar kach nischamtza, and only then the mixture became leavened. So it didn't rise while the truma thing was in it. Harezu mutares, it's permitted, because the leavening agent of truma didn't make the dough rise. Halacha zayin, kvar b'yarnu, we already explained, she'im nis'ariv truma min b'she'enei mina, that if truma becomes mixed in a way of two different materials, not apples and apples, two different species mixed together, wine fell into a soup, whatever it is, b'nei sin tam, then the way we determine whether it's forbidden or permitted is we taste it. We have a Kohen taste it. Lefichach, therefore, batzal mechutach shenizbashal imatavshel. Okay, here's our soup. So notice we have all the different vegetables, right? You have cabbage, you have carrot, you have radishes, and then this one says truma on it. See the onion? The onion is truma and it's cut. Batzal mechutach, a diced onion or a cut onion, shenizbashal imatavshel, and it was cooked with a big dish. Im habatzal truma v'hatav shel chulin. So if the onion is truma and everything else in the cooked dish is chulin, regular stuff, v'yesh by tam habatzal, and the Kohen tastes it and he says, you know, I can taste in this soup, I taste the onion. So then hatav shel asher lazarim, the entire mixture is forbidden to non-priests. V'im habatzal chulin v'hatav shel truma, if it's the opposite way, watch the switch, boom, everything is truma, only the onion is chulin. The whole cooked dish this is a Kohen's house. A Kohen's making the soup. He has a truma soup, and there's an onion that's not truma. V'nimtza tam hatavshil babatzal, and the Kohen tastes the onion, and you can taste the soup in the onion, the onion is forbidden because, again, it has absorbed the taste of the truma. Halacha ches adoshim shenizbashlu, lentils that were cooked. Now, lentils have an interesting feature that once they're cooked, they have a much harder time absorbing flavor from other foods. So the Rambam says you have lentils that were cooked. The achrakach hishlich lesoichan batzal yavish, and then you throw into the lentil soup a dry onion. Im hayashalem, if the onion was whole, hareza mutter, it's permitted. Im hayamechutach, but if it was cut b'nei sin tam, then it can affect the lentils, whether it gives taste. That's, you have to taste it. V'im bishel habatzal im ha'adashim. What if you didn't throw in the onion after they were cooked? You cooked the onion with the lentils. Bein shalem, bein mechutach, then whether it's whole or not, meshari noise b'nei sin tam, we estimate it by whether their taste has transferred. Ushar kala tavshil, and the rest of the cooked dish, bein shehishlich habatzal achar shenizbashel, bein shebishla ima tavshil, bein shalem, bein mechutach, whether the onion was thrown in after it was cooked or before it was cooked, whether it was whole or diced, meshari noise b'nei sin tam, we estimate it by whether it gives flavor. So if I wasn't clear, there's a lentil soup and an onion, so it's the onion that has all these differences when you threw it in. The lentils don't. Why, when you throw in a whole onion to the lentil soup after they were cooked, why don't we look at the taste? Because a whole onion doesn't absorb from the lentils. It also is not going to transfer taste into the lentils because the lentils were already cooked. But if it was soft onions, a soft onion is like a cut onion in the sense that it transfers its taste and absorbs taste much easier. Same thing if you cut off its tip, right? When you get onions from the store, they have this little tip, you just cut it off. And you remove the outer layer, or it was moist. These are also cases where an onion is treated like it's cut already because you've already opened it up to the elements. You've cut the tip, so now the whole top is exposed. You took the outer layer, it's all exposed. The kafloit is this. Porum capitatum in Latin. It's a species of green onion. Yeah, the Dayeno onions. Yeah, this is a species of a Dayeno onion. Exactly. So the Rambam says it's kafloit. Bein lach, bein yavesh, bein shalim, bein mechutach, whether it's moist or dry or whole or cut, b'nei sin tam. It does have the power to absorb taste and transfer taste, so it's always measured by whether or not it has transferred taste into the other cooked foods or it has absorbed taste of the other cooked foods. Halacha tes. Hakoivesh yarak shel chulin im yarak shel truma. Top left picture. Okay, you see there's a bunch of pickles. He's pickling a bunch of vegetables, and one of the pickles is truma. So he's pickling vegetables of chulin with vegetables of truma. Hareza muter lizarim. Says the Rambam, interestingly, even though usually, or in many areas of halacha, pickling is considered like cooking, which causes taste to transfer between objects, but pickling in this case is not like cooking. And the other vegetables are permitted to be eaten by a non-Kohen. Chutz mimine bitzalim, v'chatzir, v'shumim, except for types of onions and scallions and garlic. They're more powerful, they're more pungent. Sheim kavash yarak shel chulin, im bitzalim shel truma. If you were to pickle vegetables that are chulin with onions of truma, ay bitzalim shel chulin, im bitzalim shel truma, or onions of chulin with onions of truma, hare elu asurin, they are going to be forbidden. Kavash yarak shel truma, im batzal shel chulin, if it's vegetables of truma with onions of chulin, hare habatzal muter lezarim. The onion is only powerful in transferring off its taste, not in absorbing taste. So the onion, which is chulin, is not going to absorb the taste of the pickled vegetable of truma, and it's going to be fine. Halacha yud, zeisei chulin, shekavshanim zeisei truma. Olives. Chulin olives that were pickled with truma olives. Im hayu ptsuyin elu va'elu. If both of them were crushed, oisha hayu chulin ptsuyin v'shal truma shleimin, or at least the chulin ones were crushed, and the truma ones were whole, because crushed olives absorb much easier. So even if the truma ones were whole, but the crushed chulin olives will absorb from the truma. Oisha kavshan b'mei truma, or they were pickled in brine that was truma brine. Hare elu asurin, they are forbidden, because they have certainly absorbed from the truma. Avalim hayu shnei and shleimim, but if both sets of olives were complete, were whole. Or the truma olives were crushed and the chulin ones were whole, so only the truma is absorbing from the chulin, not the other way around. And they are permitted because the rule is when you have crushed olives and whole olives, the crushed ones are the ones that are absorbing from the whole ones. Only goes one way. Halacha Yud Aleph, mei kvashim umei shlokei shel truma. Water in which truma was pickled or cooked, harehen asurin lezarim, is forbidden to non-Kohens, like borscht. Right? What's borscht? Borscht is beets, is a pot of water. You cook beets in it. You take out the beets, and the water is holding the beet substance. So that's forbidden to a non-Kohen. Halacha Yud Bey is hasheves. Sheves is dill. So here we have a soup with dill sprinkled on top. So the Rambam says dill, to begin with, is only there to provide flavor to the rest of the soup. So therefore, before it transmits its taste to the pot, yesh ba mishum truma, it can be considered truma and have the effect of truma. Misha nasna tam bakdeira ein ba mishum truma. But once it flavors the dish, the laws of truma don't apply anymore to it. It loses its substance. Halacha Yud Gimel haroide paschama. I'm not sure if you can see this clearly, but in the olden times, they used to have this little, even today in bakeries, they still use this thing, this flat type of utensil, and you grab bread from the oven. Now, you can't see it here, but in the Talmudic times, the ovens were like a diagonal type of a little...
Like a
Huh?
matzah oven,
No, matzah oven today's are flat. This was like it's a round structure that goes kind of up diagonally, so it contains the heat. And you would stick the bread to the walls of the oven. Okay, and there would be a special way to pull the bread out.
They're still doing it in Shmonat Atikva.
Okay. So in some places in Israel you can still go, you find that happen. So the Rambam says, Hareida paschama. That's the word reida. Reida refers to that action of removing bread from an oven. So you remove hot bread, v'nasna al pi chavis shel yain truma, and you put it onto a barrel of truma wine. So interestingly, it depends on the material of the bread. Im haisa paschitim harezu mutaris. If it's a wheat bread, so apparently wheat bread doesn't absorb as much, and therefore the bread remains permitted. But the barley bread is forbidden. If it was barley, it's forbidden because barley bread absorbs. Halacha Yudalit. Tanur shehisikoi bekamoin shel truma v'afa bayasapas. If an oven was heated with cumin, apparently cumin was a way to heat up ovens. You heated up an oven with truma cumin, and then you baked bread in the oven, regular bread. Hapas muteres. The bread is permitted. It's not considered to have absorbed from the truma cumin. She'ein batam kamain ala reichai, because all that's there is not the taste of the cumin, only its fragrance. The hareach einei aser, and fragrance doesn't forbid. Tesvav sa'idin shal truma shenaflu leber shal mayim. Truma barley falls into a pit of water. Afal pi shehiv ishu meimav, even though it ruins the water, harehin mutarin, it's permitted. She'ein neisen tam lifgam oiser, because undesirable, spoiled flavor doesn't bring about prohibitions, and therefore the truma barley doesn't affect the water. Tezayin tilton shel truma huve eitzai truma fenugreek. It, or its bark, the wood, shenafal l'seich ber shel yayin, falls into a pit of wine. Im yesh bezera hatilton kedei litin levadei tam beyayin. If just the seeds would be enough to flavor the wine, harei yayin asur l'zardim, so then the wine is forbidden, because the fenugreek does add a good flavor, and there's truma flavor in the wine, so the wine is forbidden to non-Kohens. Halacha Yudzayin Shnei Kaisos Shel Yayin. Okay, follow this case over here. 2 cups of wine. In times of old, before you drink wine was way too strong, you would dilute it. You have to pour some water into the cup to make it a little weaker. So you have 2 cups of wine. Echad truma ve'echad chulin. One is truma, one is chulin. Mazag kol echad b'mayim. You diluted each one with water. So this one's got water, that one's got water. The achar kach ervan, and then they both fell in to 1 cup. So now in this cup, what do you have? You have truma wine, chulin wine, but also water. So the Rambam says, we ignore the chulin wine, and we focus on the fact that truma wine has mixed with water. Shahare Einay Minai, which is not its type, it's different species. Imroi Oise Hamayim Levatel Tam Yena Truma, if there's enough water to cancel the taste of the wine of Truma, Hare Hakil Muter Lazarim, everything is permitted to non-Kohanim. V'im lav, if not, Asr, it's forbidden. Shekvar Bi'arnu, we already explained, She'en Hamayim Malin Asayayin, that water cannot combine to an amount of wine to nullify Truma, to different species, but if the wine itself, if the water itself has enough to nullify the Truma, then it's nullified. Halacha Yud Ches. Yayin shal Truma shenafel al gabi peiris. Truma wine fell onto a bunch of fruit. Yedichem v'hem mutaris. You can wash off the fruit. Let's say it's apples, yeah? You can wash off the apples, and they're permitted. V'chein shemen shal Truma shenafel al gabi peiris. Yedichem v'hem mutaris. Also, if oil of Truma fell onto fruit, you wash them and they're permitted. Nafal Hashem al gabi yayin, if oil falls onto wine, Truma oil onto regular wine, yakpe oisai. Let it all congeal. V'hayayin muter lazar, and then you just remove the oil, and the wine is permitted to the non-Kohanim. Nafal al gabi hatzir, if oil fell onto brine, yakpe oisai, also leave it to coagulate, to congeal. V'yitel klipa me'al hatzir, take off all the oil, plus a little bit, like a peel's layer, from the brine, so that all the taste of the oil in the brine will go away, and it's permitted. Yutes kedera shabishal truma, a pot in which you cooked truma, lo yevashal b'chulin, you cannot cook regular grain. It's like fleischiks and milchiks. Meat and milk, you have two dishes in your house, so a Kohen would have to have two sets of pots in his house. Truma pots and chulin pots. If you have a truma pot, you cannot cook in it chulin. If you did, it affects the entire dish by taste. In other words, if you cook a truma soup in the pot, and the next day you cook a chulin soup, you have to taste the soup. If there's truma taste in it, the whole thing is forbidden to non-Kohanim. But if you washed out the pot first with water or with wine, now you can cook chulin in it. If you only cook with part of the utensil, say you have a big pot, and you only cook truma up to a quarter of the pot, so you don't have to wash out the whole thing. Simply wash the place where you cooked, and that's enough. Halacha Chaf, the Rambam concludes these laws with the following reflection. Truma G'doila, or Trumas Meister, V'hachala, V'habikurim. Both the great Truma, 2% you give to the Kohen. Trumas Meister, it's the 10% that the Levi gives from his tie to the Kohen. Chala, it's the first part of the dough that a woman gives, or a man also, to a Kohen. Bikurim is the first fruits of the Shivas Haminim, the 7 types of fruits that Israel is blessed with. Kula Nikru Truma. They're all called in the Torah by the name Truma. Truma, of course, is called Truma, but the Rambam gives us the other verses. Bisrumas Meiser Nemar, when it comes to Trumas Meiser, the portion of the Levi gives to the Kohen, it says, V'harei Moisem Mimenu Trumas Hashem. See there, it's called Truma. You lift from it the Truma of God. V'oimer, and when it comes to Chala, it says, Kisrumas Goyren, treat it like the Truma of the granary. Uvechala nemar chala torimus truma. Over here also, the same verse. Chala you should lift up as truma. Some say kitrumas garden is a proof for the last case, trumas meiser. Others say it's a proof for chala. V'nemar, and where does it say truma about bikurim? So it says, this is an interesting law. It says in the verse, Leisucha lechol bisharecha, masar degoncha tireshcha v'yitzarecha, ustrumas yodecha. The Torah was talking about Jews were in the desert. So the Torah tells them when you're going to come into Israel, you're going to build yourself a temple, there are going to be certain things that you're going to have to eat only in the temple or in Jerusalem. One of them is going to be Ma'asar degoncha, tireshcha v'yitzarecha, the tithes of your grain, of your wine, of your oil. And the last thing on the list is Utrumas yodecha, the truma of your hands. Ve'ein lecha davar shato navo asmakim. Now there's nothing that needs to be brought to Jerusalem that was not detailed in this verse, except for bikurim. they're the ones being referred to with these words. It's about them, as the Torah says, the truma of your hands. So here we have a verse calling bikurim truma. From here you learn that they're called truma. Lefichach, therefore, because all four things, truma, trumas meiser, chala, and bikurim, because they're all called truma, dinar baitan le'inyan achila v'dimua echadu. They all have the same laws with regards to eating and with regards to mixtures. Kulan eilin be'echadu meya, they all become nullified in 1 to 100. Umittarfin zeim zeh, they all combine with each other. So if you have an apple of truma, an apple of trumas meiser, an apple of bikurim, not an apple, a grape of bikurim, and they fall into other grapes, you have to have 100 times them all. V'imnitmu yisarfu, if they become impure, they all have to be burnt. V'din trumas meiser shel demai, b'chol elu adrachim, even if it's trumas meiser that's of questionable status. Demai means questionable grain. You're not sure if the owner separated the tithes, in which case you must separate it again. So even trumas meiser of demai, b'chol elu adrachim ke trumas meiser shel vadai. In all these ways, it's exactly compared to definite trumas meiser. Elo she'ein loiken al achilasa, with one exception, that you don't get lashes for eating it. And the final halacha says that Rambam, kol ha'oichel truma, any kohen who eats truma, David, you have to know this when Mashiach comes. When anybody who eats truma, mevarech birkas oisei meichel. First, you make the blessing on the food. If it's bread, you make hamaitzi. If it's a grape, you make ha'etz. V'acher kach mevarech, and then a special blessing, a second blessing. Asher kitchanu b'miktushasei shel Aaron, v'tzivanu lechol truma. Like the Kohen blessing begins with the same words, right? Hashem made us holy with the holiness of Aaron. Yes, and here it's v'tzivanu lechol truma. Hashem sanctified us with the Kedusha of Aaron, and he commanded us to eat truma. And the Rambam says, don't think this is some ancient custom. V'kach kibalnu v'ra'inu oisam mevarchim, and we have received the tradition, and we've observed Kohanim making blessings afilu b'chalas chutz ha'aretz, even when they ate challah in the diaspora, which is a much lower level. It's not a biblical obligation; it's a rabbinic obligation. Shegam achilas kodshei hagvul ka'avoda. The reason that it requires a special blessing is because even when the Kohanim eat sacrifices or holy things that belong to them in Israel, it's like serving Hashem. It's like serving in the temple. Shanemar, as it says, avodas matana etenes kunaschem. All the elements of your priesthood are called a service of a gift, including when you have to eat. Like when a Jew eats, it's holy when you make a blessing. When a Kohen eats, it's even holier. It's like serving Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore it requires a special blessing. Asher kitchanu b'kdushasei shel Aaron. Brich rachamana desayan. Blessed is Hashem who gives us assistance. Mazel tov for concluding the laws of Truma.